With Slaanesh, pain is part of the experience, and certainly will be for quite some time, as of course Korn has been announced for the next DLC, which means Slaanesh gets to wait if they get a DLC at all, which I'm pretty sure they will, but they just have to wait. Anyway, what can Creative Assembly do to help Slaanesh in the meantime? We'll talk about that in this replay today from Anti-Kaiju, who is an absolute Chad and decided to take Slaanesh in my recent South Sea Mercenary League qualifier number 3 up against Hadrez, a veteran who himself has taken some Slaanesh elements of his Warriors of Chaos army. He's got Sigvald here with Eocold to back him up, and it looks like Chaos Sorcerer of Metal, Mirror Guard, some Chosen, and Chaos Knights. Got Marauder Horse Masters, plenty of them, and some more Poison Warhounds. Yep, mix of Horsemen and Horse Masters, plenty of Skirmish. Some Furies up in the sky here. Definitely been buffed. Quite good for Slaanesh, but they do lack some other viable mobile options, and that's one of their biggest issues, and one thing I'll talk a little bit more about in just a second. Got a line of Hell Scourges, some auxiliaries supporting Devoted Marauders out on the flanks, 2 Chaos Knights of Slaanesh. Going to be actually good units here in this army. And then I think there were some Heartseekers somewhere. Yes. Yeah, one of the worst units in the game, probably, actually, in practice. I mean, they can be good in very weird niche situations, but we'll compare these guys to Centaurs after the fact. But big thing that Creative Assembly could do is buff the HP on Seekers and Heartseekers to make them more viable like cavalry options. Right now, they are just completely not viable. Likewise, restore a little bit, just a little bit of the previous power of Hellstriders. Also make them at least a viable light cavalry option, even if they aren't incredible individually in combat. Of course, they have blazing fast speed, which is certainly a benefit in and of itself, but just in terms of actually holding up in combat, they really don't do great here. These Heartseekers are going to go for it and get some damage in on these Marauder Horsemen. Obviously going to take a lot of damage in return from those Javelins. Of course, they just lack HP overall, which is their biggest issue. Slaanesh also lacks effective tools to kill single entity characters. Sigvald they do have, so I guess you could, wet noodle Sigvald against himself, but not really a lot else to try and kill somebody like Sigvald or Eocold here, so they will be quite an issue, of course. The Herald is quite good on foot, or on any mount pretty much, has Portal Glyph, which is a great item right now, and Lord Slaanesh is very good as well. So not all nightmares for Slaanesh, but definitely not the best by any means. Yeah, see the Chosen in combat here against these warriors. Big mess of armored dudes slugging it out here. Mirror Guard in the center for Hadrez. Warriors of Chaos. They'll be, again, formidable unit. Of course, can be brought by Anti-Kaiju if you so choose here. But anyway, in the back line, Fury's doing their best to try and tangle with these mobile units, kind of zone and screen them out. Heartseekers taking a substantial amount of damage, but potentially a little rear charge here on those Chaos Knights. Yeah, let's keep the health bars up as we see some Furies hold up here as well from the Portal Glyph. That was a pretty decent rear charge. They were able to get some damage in on Chaos Knights, but then a counter rear charge from the Horse Masters as more Horse Masters just pile in here, and yeah, that one charge is not enough to pay for themselves, and the problem with Heartseekers is they just don't often get more than that one good charge, right? Really nasty final transmutation here as well. It's all these Chaos Knights of Slaanesh. Going to do substantial damage to them. Does huge damage to the Herald as well if she strays into that zone. She needs to stay far away from that. Again, the biggest issue by far is Slaanesh demons. Like, I get they're supposed to be squishier in practice than other demon counterparts, but they are too squishy. They should be maybe like 10% squishier, not like 50% squishier or more, which is what it feels like. I know the numbers probably don't quite bear out like that, but we'll do some comparisons again after the fact. Not that Anti-Kaiju is completely out of this, but I mean, he is already down about 2,400 points worth of damage value against these warriors here, although certainly is pressing. Definitely has bested these Chosen here. Problem with Hadrez's army is so much value is in these skirmish units, and it's it's kind of funny to watch Slaanesh get kited, but this is very much where Slaanesh is at right now. The most optimal ways to play them are often with basically just playing Warriors of Chaos with a more limited roster, because the demons are, for the most part, just not best. Fiends can be, again, their units situationally can be good, especially if you have extremely good micro, but for the vast majority of us without godlike micro, we'll struggle to make any of these units work. And again, another thing that could just be rectified by a little bit of an HP buff. Spawns also are probably decent for Slaanesh. I've been seeing spawns for some other factions, which definitely could help in some matchups, but lack of anti-large is another big problem. Lack of anti-infantry, weirdly enough, just lack of viable tools in general, because the damage dealers on their roster, right, which is meant to be, in a lot of cases, their demonic units, just don't get it done. So, despite demonic buffs to a lot of other factions benefiting them greatly, you know, Leech is just absolutely ascended god tier right now. But, you know, Khorne's even a little bit better. Nurgle's not the worst, even though after a DLC you would expect them to maybe be a little bit higher, but, you know, they're fine. Slaanesh is a faction that should be very good if played well, but right now just the tools are not there to do it on a consistent basis. So, yeah, Chaos Knights are one of those tools that are quite good, but of course are shared across a bunch of different Chaos rosters. It's not necessarily an advantage in a matchup like this. You see some Locus of Grace here from Herald, who's been able to stay mostly alive so far. And, yeah, Antikaiju just kind of defending, eating those javelins right now. Not a lot else that he can do besides just, you know, eat the damage on his cheaper units. It's basically not the Knights, right? But the Locus of Grace should allow these Knights of Slaanesh to win out against their regular Chaos Knight counterparts. Watch these massive Knights duke it out. Pink Bros against the Undivided Orange. Sounds like Nuka-Cola flavors. Maybe I've just been playing too much 76 lately. Anyway. Yes, Chaos Nuka. Honestly, this is total aside. Unrelated. Well, somewhat related, but there's some power armor skins in Fallout 76 that are very, very reminiscent of Khorne. And it does make me pretty happy that something like that is kind of cross-culturally referenced, even if it's not directly, of course, licensed, especially with Games Workshop. It's just like, oh, dude in power armor with a skull motif. It's kind of hard not for it to look Khorne-like, but yeah, the helmet shape is, again, not explicitly Khorne, but very reminiscent of a sort of Warriors of Chaos. Anyway, but all that aside here to say that this will go on for some time. Antikaiju manages to keep it respectable in terms of damage value, all things considered. But veteran, very strong tournament player like Hadris here, just continuously wearing him down with these Horse Masters and using all that ammunition. Knights, as they move out into space here, will just get dragged down. That Metal Sorcerer also has just got an absolute mad value. The, Herald herself can be quite decent. Like I said, the value for the cost is probably pretty good here. Well, maybe not a ton of raw value in terms of lash. Honestly, the Chariot can be quite strong as well in certain situations, but probably wouldn't have benefited much against this build since there weren't really any infantry in it. It's all skirmish focused. But, yeah, unfortunately for Slaanesh, going with, like, your own horsemen plus the Hellstriders really just can't win in a fight like this. Which, I mean, if, again, the Hellstriders were better, a build like this would just not be nearly as viable. You can pretty much guarantee that most people are not going to be taking Hellstriders. So anyway, I think I've made my point pretty clear in this in regards to the mobility aspect of Slaanesh. Another big one would be to remove the charge bonus penalty for a devastating flanker. There's a lot of units in the game that have a lower charge bonus. Again, I'll show some comparisons, but devastating flanker literally gives a penalty to charge, which, you know, while yes, you can often get side or rear charges, and you should try for positioning as such, I don't necessarily think that those units should be paying as much of a penalty or a penalty at all on their base charge bonus, because you can't always guarantee a charge. Sometimes you do have to charge from the front, or sometimes your opponent turn to faces you. Often, in multiplayer, especially if your opponent's very good, they will often turn to face you. So, countercharge you. It can be tricky to get that use out of that very consistently. So, Adris takes the win there. Somewhat for Slaanesh's glory. You have the Mirror Guard here with Sigvald, but of course got to split that up with 2 Tzeentch Bros here, and then all the Undivideds as well. But yeah, overall, Chosen still managed to get some good value despite getting kind of pounded there. Horsemaster's just fantastic. Consistent value there, as well as Horsemen when used appropriately. Again, it's a little bit of meta mind games here to know that Slaanesh likely is not actually to go with a lot of mobility in this matchup, weirdly enough. And it's a big problem because their faction identity really isn't complete without those units being viable, right? So let's just quickly go on as I just rush through all the values there. Not really a ton to talk about, but one quick comparison. So Seekers, right? A similar cost to something like Centaurs or Tzeentch, which are probably the best, cavalry, light cavalry in the game for this cost, and very comparable in many ways. They're magic damage, fast light cavalry, hard hitting. But notice the thing for the Centaurs. They have an extra 1,000 HP plus 800 barrier. So we're looking at extra 1,820 HP effectively, right? And especially for resisting like volleys of missile, like low tier missile fire, incidental damage from low tier units or charges from enemies. Centaurs, I mean, barrier obviously is huge in and of itself, but that extra 1,000 HP difference is just insane. So not that I think Seekers should be as tanky, again, as other cavalry units. The Slaanesh, in theory, and keeping with their theme and lore, should have units which probably have a little bit lower HP on average, but a little bit lower, not like, again, a significant amount lower. 1,000 HP is huge, especially when you only have, over 5,000 to begin with, less than 6,000. It's a significant percentage, right? So, anyway, that's one piece of that mobility. Hellstriders, similarly, could do with a little bit of a similar HP buff, if they all share the same HP pool. That would also apply to these Hell Scourges and Hellstriders, which would definitely, again, help Slaanesh in that way. Making their chariots viable and functional for the first time, I think, ever would also significantly help, right? The fact that in this huge section of their roster, in which many of their sort of core key units lay, only really this one you would take on a consistent basis, and that I would recommend taking on a consistent basis. All of these other ones, even the Lance Knights of Slaanesh, which again, 60 charge on them. We come in here and look at the Tzeentch Knights, 80 charge, right? So they do pay significant charge penalty for having devastating flanker, which in theory is great, but in practice it doesn't nearly work as well as what you would want, right? So anyway, that's my soapbox for today. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.